Welcome to Leading Beyond Limits, the podcast where we explore the extraordinary journeys and insights of remarkable leaders who have pushed the boundaries of what's possible. Your host, Angel Radcliffe, who is a digital transformation leader, author, speaker, and financial educator, will lead each episode and dive deep into the stories, strategies, and philosophies that have empowered these exceptional individuals to lead, inspire, and achieve beyond the ordinary. We're about to embark on a journey of discovery and inspiration, and together, we'll learn what it takes to lead beyond limits. So grab your cape, or at least your favorite coffee mug, because we're about to unravel the extraordinary tales of trailblazers who've turned impossible into I'm possible. Let's get started.
We're going to dive into leadership strategies that transform organizations from the top down. I am so excited to introduce our guest, Liz Weber, a renowned expert in business strategy, leadership development, and executive team empowerment. Today, she'll be sharing her wisdom on how to take your leadership team from good to great and how to build a culture of strength and resilience at the highest levels of your organization. Let's get started. Liz, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Angel. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm excited to have you on and talk about how do we energize that executive team. I want you to share some details about yourself and how you've become so passionate about leadership.
Sure. Well, I guess my passion for leadership kind of started when I was a kid. Believe it or not, I'm the youngest of 13 children. So growing up, I was fortunate in that my father was a small business owner and my siblings and I were his workforce. So from a very young age, I was able to observe how my father and my mother were both very good at delegating, managing time, organizing teams, managing projects, getting things done on tight budgets and tight timelines. And for me, it was just a natural way of looking at situations of, here's a problem, here's something that needs to be built, here's something that needs to be cleaned up. How are we going to do it? Who's going to handle what? Let's get it done. And it just kind of became part of my DNA, I think. And then I knew I started having some leadership ambitions actually when I was in college because I was taking an aerobics class. And like most college students, I needed money. And I realized that if I taught the aerobics class, I could actually get paid for exercising. And I also realized I liked being in front of the group to lead the activities. And over time, I just kind of got into more and more leadership positions. In the professional arena, my background, my undergrad degree is in international business, and my master's is in international business. And I thought, coming from a very small town, I wanted to be an international commodities broker. Where I got that idea from, Angel, I have no idea, but that was my dream. Flash forward, coming out of college, I was very fortunate in picking up a internship with the U.S. Department of State. And that office that I started working in was like the State Department version of the military commissary system. So at a very early age, I started working with importers and exporters, food brokers, helping to get food and other products to the American embassies and consulates around the world. Within about 6 months of me starting in that office, I started traveling internationally, and I started advising and helping spouses of foreign service officers or local nationals who were managing the commissaries and other activities at the embassies, how to do their jobs a little bit more effectively. So my whole arena of leading and advising really started professionally when I was 22. And then I also started managing a staff and things like that. So my skill sets, my love for leading, my love for educating and teaching and leading others has kind of been built into my DNA. And that has led me to do what I do now, which is work with executive teams, business owners, and boards of directors in a business advisory capacity. And basically I do that through strategic planning facilitation with them, succession and workforce planning, and overall executive and leadership development.
Thank you so much for sharing. And I want to go back to, even when you were a kid, and you mentioned like leadership being a part of your DNA. So I have to ask this question. And so many people, this is definitely a debatable topic, but do you think or do you believe in natural born leaders?
That's a tough question for a reason. I do believe there's some truth in that. I can just see with my own siblings, there are 12 of us still living, and every one of them is incredibly intelligent, but there are several of us who have chosen to own business owners and leaders, and others who did not. And, we came from the same gene pool. So does everybody have some leadership potential? I believe so. But I think it also, Angel, what needs to come into the conversation is what do we mean by leader in this question? Are you meaning a leader of a company, a leader of an organization, or are you simply the individual? I shouldn't say simply, but are you the individual who takes charge of situations in your home? You're a strong parent and you deal with situations that come up with your home, with your children, with your community. There's different aspects of leadership as well.
Definitely, leadership is versatile. It's not always something that you're doing in the corporate arena. So you can be a leader in your own right, as you mentioned, in your home life, in your personal life, like something else you're doing. But the person that's stepping up, the person who's in charge and making decisions, and you're not afraid and you're fearless. So I definitely agree with that aspect. And it's very interesting when you have someone who stands out. If you have a lot of siblings and or maybe multiple siblings that are standing out in this leadership capacity. And then you have the people that are sort of sitting in the back burner and, taking a seat. And I've always been very interested in that dynamic of how leaders are developed throughout families. And some people will say if you're firstborn or secondborn, you have that natural innate ability to lead because you're typically taking charge of your other siblings. But then you tend to see some people who are maybe the younger siblings who have grown into this leadership capacity and are standing out a bit more. I want to get into a lot of the things that you are doing. And I think it's super important because, right before this show, I shared just a little bit, just a snippet of, why I am passionate about leadership and leadership development. And I didn't have like a great representation of amazing leaders. And I think it does start top down, like with your executive team, and you kind of like going down the line and making sure you're building and lifting other leaders up. So, the topic today is really energizing that executive team and getting the executive team up to par. And you put it so blunt, like your executive team is weak. You have to pump them up. And I was like, this is very catchy. I really love it. So can you give me some examples of throughout your career and throughout your coaching where you've seen a weak executive team?
Well, I hate to say it, but I've seen it a number of times. And just for clarification for your listeners, my clientele are typically small to mid cap organizations or government agencies. I don't deal with Fortune 100 companies. Mine are quite often they might be family owned or they are first or second generation, anywhere from it could be 50 employees to 1,500 employees. I'm not dealing with large massive global corporations for my typical clientele. Because of that, it is quite common to see members of the executive team who have been promoted from within, who have grown up with the organization. And that is great. That is, obviously provides a line for career development and professional growth. What the challenge that's presented by that type of scenario, though, is also you have this myopic viewpoint of leadership, and you have the greater potential to have a limited knowledge base because you've got an executive team comprised of individuals who have no external experience. And because of that, they just continue to get promoted and they're phenomenal people and they're smart people, but they're not as strong as they could or should be given where the company wants or needs to go. And because of that, then that's why a lot of the times when I'm working with executive teams, I'm helping them in a couple different ways. Number one, I'm helping them understand, and this is going to sound really basic and patronizing, but what is the role of the executive team versus the management team? And when I mean the management team, I mean, the management team in total, but also mid-level managers and frontline managers. And the role of the executive team is very different. And to lead at the executive level, to communicate at the executive level, and to manage at the executive level are very different than it is to lead or manage and communicate at what I'm going to say the mid-level management frame. And so I help them really understand how their role is different, how they need to behave differently, how they need to communicate differently, and how they need to lead differently. And for teams that have had no other exposure, that's a very big change and a very big leap for them to make.
I think you're absolutely right. And most people don't understand once you reach that level and you're in an executive role, especially if it's not with that larger, well, I would say even if it's with a larger company, the Fortune 100s, the Fortune 50s, there's strategic planning and there's organizational development, and you're thinking from a larger scale. And, sometimes people, I definitely agree with you. You're growing up in the organization, you're getting promoted really fast, and you're really not taking the time to kind of flesh out the development at one particular level. So if it's entry level management, mid level management, I've seen people, grow up in small organizations where they maybe only serve in one role for 1 year. And then, within 3, 4 years, now they're in this executive role. They haven't led a team. You'd be surprised how many people I meet who are in executive roles and they've never led a team in their entire life. And I'm like, well, they may be very good at like being a visionary or strategic planning, but what do you do when now your company is growing and now you're over a team, and what advice do you give to those leaders who are next in line? So it's very interesting. And yeah, I'm glad that you clarified the type of companies that you work for, because it definitely is different based on the structure. I want to get into like some of the key indicators that the executive team is like underperforming or they're lacking the strength. Can you point some things out for us?
That's a great question. So, a number of the things that start to pique, I'll just say my spidey sense, when I am sitting in an executive team meeting, or I'm talking to the CEO or the business owner, or one of the executives, him or herself, I will hear things such as, number one, we're not a holistic team. We're not a cross-functional team. We are very much siloed. That is a big one, and that's very common. And when I hear that, it's a prime indicator we had a dysfunctional executive team and probably a CEO that doesn't know how to pull this team together. The second thing that is area of contention, a hot button, is when there's conflict between executive team members. It could be a personality clash. It could be a clash of individual or professional goals. Again, they're not understanding their holistic collaborative responsibility to the organization. They are still functioning very much as a division director, a regional director, whatever, a bureau director. They're not functioning at the executive level. Another issue that I will see is also the executives who have, again, been promoted from within do not understand how to manage at the executive level. And I kind of put that in air quotes, if you will, because at the executive level, you have a team of managers and leaders below you who are managing the projects, managing their team members and things like that. Your role at the executive level is to clear the roadblocks for your managers so they and their teams can get things done. And where I will see executives trip up is when they want to step back and actually start doing the work that their managers are supposed to be doing. And they confuse lines of authority, they confuse timelines, they confuse people. That creates all kinds of chaos. And then the fourth thing that happens that I see with executive teams that are just not as strong as they could or should be is it kind of goes back to what I've alluded to with the previous three ideas, is they're not understanding, number one, how they are supposed to work in unison and leverage one another, but they're also not identifying what is missing from their team. And what I mean by that is when I work and coach executives who are either new to the C-suite, new to their role in the C-suite, one of the things I share with them, Angel, is in addition to the specific position you were hired to fill, whether it's CFO, COO, CRO, CTO, whatever it might be, those are the technical attributes and insights that executive team is expecting you to bring to their conversations and to the company. That's non-negotiable. But what else is missing from that team? Is that team missing someone who will call out some of their dysfunctions, who will call out when there is a lack of communication, who will be a source of reason and an ear for the CEO, who will bring something to the conversation that might calm everyone down and bring an alternative perspective. That's what I mean by having the ability to see what is missing from the executive team and bring that as well. So those are really the four main areas that I see most frequently where an executive team is not as strong as they could or should be.
And those are great points to call out. And I think you mentioned one example of the executives taking a step back and falling into that role of someone in their management team where they're sort of performing at that role, but they're supposed to be at the top of this chain and being the executive. I think that falls into a category of alignment and vision where companies don't necessarily like have great structure and have some proper descriptions of like what you should be doing or proper training or even proper leadership development, and that's maybe why those executives have to take that step back and now they're doing another role. When you at smaller companies, and I may be biased in saying this, but one of the things that I've seen is you probably don't have like the great structure, the vision, the alignment. And that can probably create challenges when you're trying to empower that executive team to lead a certain way. What are some of the biggest challenges that you've seen with leaders when they're trying to empower their executive team?
Well, it's interesting the way you asked that question because I agree with your premise, and one of the things that I do quite often with just about every client team that I work with, to your point, is when they ask me to work with their leadership team, one of the first questions I ask is, do you have a strategic plan? And if so, I need to see it. I'll sign an NDA. That's not the issue. I want to see how clear your plan is so your team knows what they're supposed to be implementing and what type of company you are working to become. Where is that line of sight? Where is that vision? If they don't have that, or if their plan is not as clear as I recommend my clients' plans be, that is something that I recommend we work on first to get that line of sight. And yeah, that happens frequently. Does it happen all the time with smaller companies? No, because obviously there are a lot of smaller organizations, mid-cap organizations that have great plans. The alignment, though, is where do the executives, and I believe this is where you were going with the question, do the various executives on the executive team in the C-suite understand what their role is with that plan? And again, that's a mind shift and that's a behavior shift at the executive level versus, being at senior management and the division level, whatever it might be. Because at the executive level, this is now where you are really involved with strategy, and you've got to be highly attuned in what the overall company strategy is and how your respective area of responsibility feeds into that and can leverage and help propel the organization forward. That's what you have to manage, and that's what you have to help your downstream understand within their various roles and responsibilities. And to your point, the position description typically talks about the specific tasks and some of the attributes that you have to bring to that position in order to be successful. There's no position description or employment contract that's going to be able to fully embody what you need to really bring to that role to be truly successful. That's a whole wealth of not only technical skills, but also, your emotional and cognitive intelligence that, how do you read a room? How do you read a team? How do you build a team? How do you handle all the financial aspects, the technical aspects, the personality clashes, the logistical concerns? There is a wealth of knowledge that you have to have at the executive level that you need to hone where every step down in leadership, you are required basically to have more and more technical skills that are more narrow. But as you go up, you need to have a wider breadth of skills that you know how to marry and weave together.
Those are really great insights, Liz. And one of the things you mentioned was asking for that strategic plan vision. And I'm glad that you called out that you'll sign an NDA. You want to see it. You want to see what's in place. You want to see where the company is going. And that's super important for someone who's coming in working from that consulting standpoint. And you're going to be providing those services to work with that executive team. Now, I think it's also going to help you really identify like these specific areas where the executive team needs reinforcement. So I'm like, this is like really great information. Someone's probably listening, like, wait a minute, let me write this down. But I want to really dive a little bit deeper. And let's say you have the plan, you're identifying these different areas for improvement. And I want to cut to the chase. Like I know it's a very long process before you actually can start giving some actionable insights to one specific company, but can you call out two actionable things an executive team can do or C-suite executive team they can do to really start driving their performance?
Sure. And it's actually, it doesn't, honestly, it doesn't take me all that long to look at their strategic plan to identify how effective it is in helping their leadership team do what is expected of them. And I say that because I'll very quickly look at their vision, mission, guiding principles or values, whatever they want to call them, what they have. I'll look at how their goals are structured, and I'll look at how clear it is to define what are the deliverables. And the reason I do that, because I am adamant that the elements of a strategic plan, the vision, mission, guiding principles, values, and strategic goals, each one of those foundational pieces of a strategic plan need to be understood at a gut level by primarily the executive team, but all employees. And I mean all employees, because each one of those elements, vision, mission, guiding principles, values, or goals, provide some level of guidance to leaders as well as to staff as to what is expected and how they need to behave and what is the timeline to get things done. And if a strategic plan is developed and the vision is fuzzy, the mission makes no sense or is 3 paragraphs long and no one knows what it is. The guiding principles are fluff. The values provide no clarity on how individuals are supposed to behave. And if the goals are nebulous and there's no timeline and there's no clear deliverable, what has been created for the leadership team, for the executive team, and for all employees is a document that is meaningless and also dangerous. And what I mean dangerous is if anyone chooses to try to implement something from the plan that is nebulous, what is being forced upon them is the requirement to guess and make up things based upon how they interpret, however they read or believe that plan was created. And Angel, you well know, let's say you have a team of 25 managers. Well, if 12 of them choose to even try to do something about the strategic plan or with the strategic plan, and it's a nebulous plan, you have 12 different managers interpreting it 12 different ways. What is that going to do, number one, to your leadership cohesion? What's that going to do to your budgets? What's that going to do to your workforce when you have potentially 12 different divisions or teams doing things 12 different ways? It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. So that's why I very quickly look to the strategic plan to figure out, is this tool a valuable resource and a strong tool that will help this leadership team? Or is this going to be dangerous and hurt the company and hurt the team and take this company and organization in a direction they do not want to go and they don't realize it?
They're great points. And Liz, I want to actually focus on one other intricate part, we're talking about vision and mission, which is super important, and ensuring the executive team is aligned. But outside of that, how important do you think continuous learning is for executives?
Oh my gosh, it's critical. It's critical. I mean, particularly in this day and age, Angel. I mean, it's with AI and everything that is happening so fast that, strategic planning, you cannot lock yourself into strategic planning. Strategic planning is a guide. It is a line of sight. It needs to be done, and you need to, have some sense of direction that you can pivot from, but it is no longer locked in dead certain. So the need for executives and any leader to continually learn and be adaptable and be willing to flex for reason is imperative. But here's the other part of it, and this is what I would encourage all your listeners to really pay attention to, particularly if they are in a role of leadership or in some way to some other function to impact or influence team members, is to create an environment and a team culture where agility and change is just how things get done, because you cannot get locked into routines. It's great to have processes, it's great to have systems, but you also need to be comfortable with adjusting them, because there is something that is indicating a need is preferable or required. A change is preferable or required. And so, I think that in and of itself speaks to the importance of executives and continuous learning, because things are happening so rapidly that, leaders, whether it's in business, government, nonprofit, whatever it might be, need to be aware of what's out there, what's happening, what's changing, what might they need to incorporate, what might they need to take out, what do they need to understand better, so that they can do their jobs as leaders even more effectively than they are right now.
And what are some ways that you've seen are effective to promote the culture of continuous learning with a growing executive team? Because, I think that's super important. Like, technology is constantly changing. If you have the functional teams and process teams like learning, and the executive teams are sort of falling behind, it sort of it sort of like really takes away the importance of their role, and sort of disengages them from the day to day. Which I've seen a little bit of both. I've seen, like, where you have, like, lower management, entry level people being educated, not necessarily the executive teams. In some companies, you don't see that learning culture at all.
Well, it's really interesting, because when I do a leadership training series at a company, quite often, as you can well imagine, I'm initially called because, the managers, have needed some leadership development and training. And before I will do any work with the next level down, I always do what I'll call a boot camp version of the material that's to be delivered to the executive team. Because, to your point, executives don't like training, but they like information. And so if I can provide them information, insights, give them the vocabulary that I'm going to be using, giving them the rationale, give them a few tips on how they can reiterate and echo this information and employ it themselves, they're good, they're set, they're on board. And their managers know the executives have had quote unquote training, the week before or 2 weeks before. So it also eases that initial pushback on any kind of training by any other leaders. So that's one way that it's easily done, not training, but like I said, I call it boot camp info sessions with them, and that works great. I mean, the other thing that I see executives do on a regular basis is there is networking, there is coaching. They will go to conferences. The conferences have got to be meaty, but they will go to conferences. They're part of business networking groups like Vistage and other things like that. They're working with business advisors. They're getting information from sources that they have vetted, that have been valuable and useful to them. And as soon as they are no longer of value or use, executives will drop them and go to the next one, which I think is smart. I think it's wise.
That's really great information. And I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, because, I've worked in consulting, and I've worked with several different companies, and companies on a smaller scale, larger scale. And so I've seen many different things that are happening. One thing that I've seen a few times is, once people reach a certain level, specifically, I can't even talk. Specifically, like once they're getting into that executive role, many people feel like they're exempt from development or they're exempt from other things like maybe mid-level management may have to go through. And so for you, when you're going in and you're working with these executive teams and you're working with these people who have this sense of, higher being and, they're in the C-suite role or VP role or EVP, whatever the role may be, what's the balance that you find between sort of empowering those executives and giving them the autonomy versus ensuring they're aligned with the overall company strategy?
Well,
Or is there, I guess the other part is like, is there even a balance?
I'm gonna kind of divide up that question because I interpreted two different things. And so the first part of it is, yeah, absolutely. I agree with your comment that, as individuals move into the executive suite, quite often they stop participating in the leadership training or the leadership development activities that other leaders and managers within the organization are either mandated or choose to do. And that creates a disconnect. That's absolutely true. I see that. That's common. That's why I also, do the boot camp version that I mentioned earlier. But on the other hand, quite often there still is this traditional time block of either 60, 90 minutes, 2 hours, or 3 hours, sometimes 4 hour training programs. That is a huge chunk of time for an executive to be in a training program if he or she is not getting relevant information very quickly. And I don't want to set them apart, but these are individuals who are earning very high salaries and have a lot of responsibility on them. And to be sitting in a training program that's 60, 90 minutes, 2 hours, 3 hours, or 4 hours long, that's not creating high impact value, that's a waste of a resource from my perspective. There is other ways to get that information to them to build those skill sets with them. That's why also a lot of the executives will get coaching. They'll one thing that I do quite often with my executives, executive teams, is we do executive group coaching. And basically it's mini training sessions without the workbooks. It's what's happening, what's not happening with the leadership team, what's happening with the next tier down, where do you have issues with them? And the things that we talk about are management issues, leadership issues of, you're having problems with these managers, you're having conflict resolution issues with these managers, you're having performance management problems with these managers. How do you give them feedback? How do you get your managers to align with the plan? How do you help them get their projects on time? The same questions and the same problems that mid-level managers have with their team members, executive leaders have that with their managers. But it's a matter of how that learning environment is created for them and how it is facilitated for them. It's much faster paced. I'll have an executive group coaching session that's 60 minutes long or 90 minutes long, and boom, we're done. And they will make decisions and they'll go. They'll make a policy change and they'll go. Angel, I coach executives, but I'm not a certified coach, and I put that out there because my quote unquote coaching sessions with my executive clients, they're 30 minutes long. That's it. It's 30 minutes. Hey, Angel, how's it going? Is there something specific you want to talk about today? Or do you want to recap some of the things we talked about last time and what might be next on this particular issue? And we hit a problem of the month and we address it. I give them some suggestions on how they might want to deal with it, give them some insights, and we're done. So it's a much faster pace. And the executives that I work with are looking for outside perspective, information, suggestions, and guidance, and that's it. And then they're off and running.
That's great information. And Liz, it sounds like with the group coaching offering, it sounds more like creating a sense of accountability while still empowering the executives. Am I correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and that was going to be like one of my questions, like how do you actually have that accountability? But it sounds like this is like a perfect option to have that. And I agree. Like what I've seen is you have the executives who don't have the time to sit in these different trainings, but they still need the knowledge. And it's like how do you feed the information to them so they're still up to date and understanding what's happening in the organization? And it creates a huge disconnect. And if you're in technology like I am and you're working on transformation projects and you have the executives missing key information, it just delays a project. So, I'm always curious, what resources companies are using sort of outside of their internal learning, outside of their internal processes. And it sounds like what you've come up with your company is a really great connector for these organizations and their leadership teams. So, and I know we're coming to a close of the show, but Liz, I want you to share how people can reach out to you and any other tips that you can share to someone who's listening that may want to use your services.
Sure, Angel. I got to very quickly touch on something that you just said as an insight for your listeners, because if I just understood you correctly, you said, executives are so leery to reach out to their internal resources, and that's absolutely true. The executive teams will not reach out to their internal HR or training staff to provide leadership advice to the executive team. There's a disconnect there. They will not reach to their subordinates to give them leadership advice. And so that's why they go to the outside.
And I feel like, unless I feel like they don't want to reach back because they're at the top of the food chain.
Yeah,
So, can you imagine being in a company and you're in a C-suite role, EVP role, whatever that may be, and you're reaching out to someone like, "Hey, I need training on XYZ," where, someone who's like 4 levels below you, they're expecting you to know everything you need to know.
well, and exactly. And you also at the executive level, you feel uncomfortable, nor should you take some of those senior level issues and be speaking with someone who is 3 or 4 levels down the food chain. But that's also why one of the things that I do with the executive team, and I remember one CEO looking at me like I was absolutely nuts, was I said, your CHRO should be your key internal advisor. She should be me here. You should be looking at her for some of these questions. And he almost fell over. He could not believe it. But that's where he should be going in that particular case to get the insights I was sharing. So, there's ways to work around it. But anyway, Angel, this has been so fun. If your listeners would like to reach out to me, my website is W as in William, B as in boy, S as in Sam, L as in Lima, L as in Lima, C as in Charlie.com, WBSLLC.com. They can reach me there. They can also find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I'm most active, and I spend most of my time on LinkedIn. And my handle on social media is Liz Weber. Weber has one B. Liz Weber CMC. Liz Weber CMC. And that's where they can find me.
And Liz, we'll definitely list those links in the show notes. Now, I know you offer, in addition to your services, you have books, several books on leadership. Are there any particular books that you'd like to call out here and share with the audience?
Sure. So one of the books that I wrote, it includes my model of 5 stages of focused leadership development. It includes a free assessment so that your listeners can take just a free assessment. It's 10 quick questions, and it will tell them which stage of leadership they are currently exhibiting. It will also help them understand which stage of leadership their team may need them to be leading in. And they can take that free assessment at my website. Again, if they go to that website, WBSLLC.com, and look in the right-hand corner, there's an orange triangle that says leadership assessment. If they click that, they will get a free assessment.
Awesome. Well, Liz, this has been a really great conversation. You've shared some invaluable insights and empowering the executive team and strengthening these teams, some key information, strategy, vision, leadership development, training. And I'd love to have you back and have a deeper conversation. So, to everyone listening, I hope that you found this information beneficial. Make sure you reach out to Liz. We'll list the contact information in the show notes. And I'm excited to see what comes out of this. And Liz, anything else you want to share? Go ahead.
Well, thank you, Angel. This has been so fun talking with you, and I hope the information's been helpful to your listeners.
Thank you for tuning into another inspiring episode of Leading Beyond Limits. If you enjoyed today's conversation and want to hear more from our incredible guests, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback means the world to us. And if you have a remarkable leader in mind who you'd like to hear on our show or any questions and comments, feel free to reach out to us. You can find our contact information in the show notes. Remember, leadership knows no bounds, and with the right insights and determination, you too can lead beyond limits. Until next time, keep reaching for the stars and leading with purpose.